So what I'll do is, as we're moving through the presentation, I know we're starting a little bit slow. Oh, good. And there's Jessica. I know we're starting a little bit behind. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go through the presentation. And if any of you have any issues hearing me, seeing anything, please feel free to put it in the chat or to let me know, okay? But Jessica, all looks okay from your end? And Westdean, all looks good on your end? Good. Okay, well, let's get started, and then I'll give a brief introduction. Hi, Ivana. Nice to see you. It's so much nicer to see faces. This is awesome. So I'm going to start off with a brief land acknowledgement before I do an introduction about myself when we get started with the presentation. In the spirit of reconciliation, I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Nakota Nations, the Métis Nation, and all peoples who make their homes here in Treaty 7 region. I personally am honored and privileged to share this journey and embrace all opportunities to engage in and demonstrate leadership towards reconciliation. I am committed to doing my best to foster safe and respectful spaces free of hate, racism, and discrimination. All my relations. So good afternoon, everyone. Is everyone enjoying the conference? Yeah, I know, Jessica, you're so busy. You're enjoying the conference in a different way. But anyway, so welcome. And as I mentioned earlier, when I introduced myself, I see that we have 10 watching, 5 of us here on the screen. This is truly a topic where I encourage dialogue, ask questions, share stories. This is how we learn, a little bit of background about myself. You'll see a quick write-up here of my consulting, which is Power of Humanity Consulting Incorporated. My previous career, for almost 18 years, I worked with the Calgary Police Service. My role was diversity and inclusion specialist. I was responsible for curriculum, design, training internally as well as externally. But, a little bit of, a personal storytelling. Initially, when I was hired with the Calgary Police Service, I was hired to develop programs in schools and in the community that addressed the issue of hate, bias, discrimination, more of that root cause level. So I had developed a program that did just that. Program did really, really, really well. I love it, love it, love it. But what happened is, probably some of you can relate, is throughout my career, my job description, my position kind of evolved and grew. And what happened is I was spending more of my time, training and educating internally, uniforms, professionals, and less of my time was being spent in the school, in the community, doing the work that I really, really, truly love and believe in so much. So long story short, not to take away from this presentation, I made a big decision during COVID to resign and start my own consulting. So with that, what I did is I relaunched the school program that I had been doing with the Calgary Police Service. And you'll see in your agendas throughout this conference, I believe it's Tuesday afternoon, I'll be presenting on my Delete Hate program, which is the program now I've recreated and will be bringing back into the schools and in the community. And then what I also do is I spend a lot of time hosting sessions. I do a lot of sessions around bias and assumptions, which is what we're going to be focusing on today. I do some work around microaggressions. I'm certified in anti-discrimination, anti-racism response as well. I'm a past president actually, and current member of the Alberta Hate Crimes Committee. So, throughout this presentation, use me, ask questions, maybe share with me a little bit about the work that you're doing, maybe what brought you to this conference, what type of interest in certain areas that you have. And I know we have a fairly small group, so it's nice to do a little bit of an introduction, and so I'll give people an opportunity to do that. I'm originally from Halifax, Nova Scotia, so you may hear a little bit of a twang. That is that East Coast maritime twang. But I've lived in Calgary for, now half my life. Love it. I've raised children here and am very blessed and privileged to do the work that I'm doing in such an amazing province. So yeah, and I guess a little bit here I have for this presentation. One thing I have to admit, technology, I can't stand it. I don't know where to look. I don't know. I'm so used to being in front of people that this is my biggest challenge of today's presentation, because I'd much rather be in person with each and every one of you. So as Jessica knows, we were on the computer last night. I probably didn't sleep much because I thought, oh my God, something's not going to work. So bear with me if a video doesn't work, if I'm not looking the right way. I tried to move my laptop closer to the window. That messed everything up today. So we're going to work with what we have. So I'll ask all of you for today's presentation, just be present. If you need to get a drink, fill up your waters, get a coffee. If you are all able to, please have a piece of paper handy. So pen, paper, I'm not going to make it too complicated today. There is an exercise I would like to do, though. I think it adds to a presentation if we're able to be engaged and facilitate something around an exercise. So please make sure you have a pen and paper handy. Remove any distractions. I know that's tough. We all have lots of stuff going on. So, and just, really center yourself. This is a topic that I think all of us are familiar with. I think we've all had some personal experiences with this. And when we're thinking about bias and assumptions and stereotypes, we truly see these behaviors seep into our daily lives, not just professionally, personally, right? In every single area of our lives. If you are involved in sports, we see it in sports. We see it at the workplace. We see it when we're out in our community, in the school system, again, in our social circles. So just acknowledge that and make yourself comfortable, okay? I'd also like to start with just a brief disclaimer. When we talk about the material in this workshop, this is based on my informal learning, right? Through storytelling, critically reflecting on my own experiences, mitigating biases. Because again, my experience working with law enforcement for 18 years, it was certainly a huge learning experience for myself personally. Made a huge decision to change my career path, which was not only scary as a mom, as a sole provider for my son. When you move away from an organization and open things independently, there's so much risk that comes along with that. But, like I mentioned to you before, my heart and soul is truly with this work, and I believe in it. And the work that I do in the schools, the work that I do in the community, this comes from a very intentional place, a genuine place within myself. I've experienced bias on a number of occasions, and I hope that we can all share some sort of personal stories throughout this session. And, when we're looking at about an hour, that's like just really scraping the surface. I just finished a 2-day course myself, actually, really, because I think it's important for me to learn through other forms of teaching. And we talked about unconscious bias in the workplace specifically, and so some things I certainly took from that course, because it's a lifelong journey. This is lifelong learning when you talk about, cultural competency and intercultural awareness, like all the systems that go in place. So this is really based on some of my experiences and my learning. My motivation comes from curiosity. I'm very curious. I love to learn. I never ever claimed to be an expert. I think, regardless of my educational background, I have my degree from the Mount St. Vincent University. I have my adult learning certificate. I started my master's. I traveled all, through the United States with the National Multicultural Institute taking training. But I don't think this is an area where you can ever become an expert at it, because it's always changing, right? I'm learning things every single day from the people I meet and the conversations I have. And I think that's the true beauty, I think, of, when we're exploring our bias and our differences. It's being curious. And, for me, I have a desire to bridge cultural differences by this lifelong journey. I think this is something that I'm going to be exploring my whole entire life. And I'm excited to do that. I also want to say that, any consequences from implementing the strategies presented in this workshop, positive, negative, are the responsibility of the participants. This is something that doesn't come with a handbook that, one response or one thing works every single time, right? This is, when I worked for the Calgary Police Service and I would train my recruit police officers, they would always say, just tell us what to do. If we go to a call and they're from this particular religion or this particular culture, how do I handle it? And I thought, I don't have a handbook for you because there's so much diversity within diversity. For me to say that, this one response, this one behavior, this one way of treating a particular group is going to work all the time, I'd be setting folks up to fail. So, even for all of you today, I think each and every one of us can learn from one another. So let's take the opportunity to share maybe things that have worked, things that maybe didn't work so well, and take the opportunity just to learn. Okay. So today we're going to talk about, again, we have a short period of time. I have some videos we're going to do. I may save that until the end, not to screw up this whole entire presentation. I'm afraid if I do anything different, I'm going to lose all of you. So we probably will watch some videos near the end. We'll do some exercises. We'll share. We'll talk about bias and how it impacts our day-to-day lives and interactions. We'll talk a little bit about intercultural learning and the benefits towards its leadership skills and the work that maybe we're all currently doing. And also recognize systems creating barriers for those from different backgrounds. And those meaning all of us in the room today. What are some barriers that we've faced? What are some things that we've faced along the way that could have, been a detriment to our career or a barrier to maybe moving forward throughout our careers. So let's have an opportunity to talk and to share. So before I move on, I guess I just want to ask, again, it's kind of nice having a smaller group. I wish we had the 50, but hey, we'll work with what we have. How familiar are you, with unconscious bias training? And I have a few things listed here, like not at all, this is your first workshop, all the way up to maybe you facilitate workshops, on this topic. And I think this would be a nice time for those of you that are comfortable doing so. If you're okay to maybe briefly introducing yourself. Tell me a little bit about where you're calling in from, what drew you to the Ignite Change conference. I'd love to learn from where you are, what you do, a little bit about yourselves, if you're okay mentioning that. And Wesdeen, I think it's Wesdeen, you kind of came in first, so maybe I'll start with you if you're comfortable. Oh, you're still muted.
There, I'm unmuted. I'm a volunteer with John Humphreys.
Oh, nice.
So that's how I came to this. My first contact with John Humphreys was talking about disability and ableism through the arts.
Excellent.
I'm calling in from Spring Lake, so I'm about 20 minutes east of Paul Band, where I first taught.
Okay, now where is that? I'm not familiar with that area.
We're about half an hour west of Edmonton.
Okay.
So yeah, and Paul's kind of unusual in the fact that it's both Stoney and Cree.
Interesting.
So yeah, there was some genocidal issues, shall we say, that meant that the Stoney band that it was supposed to be was decimated in population. And so Cree people from the north as well as from Musqueam area joined Paul Band a number of years ago in order to bolster its numbers and make it a viable band. And I facilitate disability awareness training for businesses and post-secondary institutes. So I would say that I'm familiar with unconscious bias, but I really do want to expand what I know about it. And for me, this was also an opportunity to see what you're doing, and to say, okay, this is what I'm not doing. And so that was part of the interest in joining this. Thanks.
Thank you. Excellent. Nice to meet you. And then Jessica, I know you and I have spoken, but in terms of, I know Jessica had mentioned, familiar, but would like to expand. And I think that's where a lot of us are, So thanks for that, Jessica. Is it Ivana or Ivana?
Ivana. Yeah, perfect. I work with the John Humphrey Center for Peace and Human Rights as well. And I particularly work on a program called Stride Advocacy, where we help, where our volunteers help people draft human rights complaints for issues of discrimination and failed accommodations and things like that.
Mhm.
So I would say I'm familiar, but I definitely want to expand, or even the one lower somewhat. I've had training, but I need a refresher. Yeah, but I'm coming in from Calgary at Treaty 7. And yeah, just excited to be here today. Thanks for having me.
Yes, no, thank you. And like I said, I'm here in Calgary too. So if you ever want to meet up and have any conversations, like I know I'll show you on my website a little later. And as I mentioned, I'll also be facilitating the Delete Hate workshop later on in the week. So for any of you that want to reach out after the training, you will have all of my contact information. So don't feel as if, oh gosh, we only had an hour and a half, to talk about this. Please just know that I'm always available to chat about the work that you're doing up north, the work that you're doing here in Calgary. It's really exciting for me to learn too, all the things that are going on here in the city. So thanks, Ivana. And Katie, I'm not sure if you're still here, if you wanted to introduce yourself. I think you and I haven't met if you're here, yay.
I am, yes.
Hey.
Sorry, I was just having a late lunch.
Oh, good. You eat away. Eating is important.
Yeah. So I guess I found out about this convention through a local Indigenous harm reduction group that I volunteer with.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sent the calendar and I saw everything that is being offered, and it was really exciting and a good opportunity for me to learn more about unconscious bias with this session in particular, because I grew up in a family that was very, on my dad's side, very conservative and oil and gas sort of thing. And, not that relates exactly to unconscious bias, but it's very just kind of prominent in my upbringing, that sort of perspective. And so that trickles down into a lot of, how I've interacted with other cultures over the years, or how I haven't, because I haven't really been given the opportunity to. And so now I'm just wanting to seek out those opportunities and learn more about other cultures and other people, so that I'm not kind of stuck in my little bubble, and I'm branching out a little more.
Oh, I appreciate that. And thank you for your honesty with that. I think that's a natural stage to be at with your kind of your cultural identity, you're asking more questions, as you're getting older. I think, we're like, okay, well, why do I act this particular way? Why do I think like this? What groups have I been exposed to versus the groups that I haven't been exposed to, and why? Like, I wonder what's been holding me back. I can relate. I was raised in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I come from a diverse background. My father is half Lebanese. My mom's Italian. Still doesn't explain the last name Lee. My ex-husband's Chinese. So it's one of these things where I've been around diversity, my whole life. But I'll be honest with you, I didn't really start even exploring my own cultural identity, like in terms of, well, I wonder what part of Italy my mother's from, and Lebanon, and tell me more about my grandparents, and how, like a lot of questions I had as I get older. And I still continue, like I said earlier, I still continue this journey, because it truly does. Like I said, it really does trickle into our behaviors, right? Without us even realizing it, right? They can trickle into our behaviors. So good for you for taking this journey. And I'm here. If you have any questions, like I said, along the way, please feel free to ask. And thanks, Jessica, for asking if anyone else wants to pop in from the chat. They're welcome to do so, but I haven't seen anything yet. So we are going to just keep plugging through. So in terms of strategies to mitigate our own biases, because, I often start when I'm in a large group of participants, I'll always start off by asking, do we all have a pulse right now? Just check. Do we have a pulse? Are we good? We're breathing, right? Which means we all have bias, right? Every single one of us, we all have bias, right? So it's one of these things we talk about normalizing and processing this, It's not about having guilt, because we think a certain way, we react in a certain way. But let's start thinking about why, right? a big piece, and again, I have to really separate myself from the delete hate presentation and today focusing on bias and assumptions. But I think it's really, really important to come back. And Katie, you said it beautifully, like the way you're raised, and to start looking at the root cause of where these behaviors and these attitudes and these beliefs or biases or stereotypes, like where they're coming from. It could be as simple as maybe you're watching a particular show, a particular program, and you're binge watching a program, which I'm sure a lot of us have done at some point in our lives. And the biases can actually trickle in just from the shows that we're watching, without us even realizing it, right? It's little things like that. So family, the way we were raised, what we're watching on television, who our circle, we're going to talk later about, the people in our lives, the people in our circles, but who we're surrounding ourselves with, right? The music we're listening to. So these things come from so many different places, right? So we talk about the motivation, find the motivation, why and for whom, right? In terms of mitigating, like what's your motivation? And a lot of you address that, why you're here, the work that you're doing, was Dean up north, and the work, Jessica, obviously, that you're doing, and Ivana, we've all talked about kind of that motivation and really building that awareness. This is why you're here. I often say, we don't have a lot of time today, but one thing I would give as a bit of a homework, and I actually just did it again. I usually try to do 1 or 2 a year. I go on to the Harvard Implicit Association Test site, and I do some IAT, implicit association tests, a couple times a year. And there's multiple. You can choose different tests. You can go and try to look at gender bias. You can be specific towards particular cultures, disability, or varying abilities. So, pop in and do some of these tests for yourself. It's something that you don't have to share. It's more of a personal journey. It's more to really, reflect just your critical thinking, right? And to complement that. And maybe find somebody you trust. You can reach out to me and you can say, hey, Liz, I did one of those IAT tests. I want to chat with you a little bit about it, because sometimes they can shock you. There's a lot of people that think, well, I really didn't think I had bias towards that particular group. For those of us that identify as women, it's like, as a woman and someone who identifies as as a cis woman, it's like when I did the test, like I was kind of surprised that I showed some gender bias. And without doing the IAT, you think, oh my gosh, I would never think like that. I support all my female friends. I'm a strong, independent woman, and all these things. And then you do these tests and you think, oh, maybe there's some areas that I still need to work on. And that's okay, right? So that's something I would highly, highly recommend all of you to do. Maybe not this week, next week, but it's called the Implicit Association Test. And I'll show you a slide here soon. Harvard Implicit. If you Google IAT test, Katie, you'll find a ton. There's so many out there. I have connection here, connecting with people who are different, right? We're going to talk a little later about the like me bias, right? And I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but we'll talk a little bit about that a little later, but connecting with people, who are different than you, maybe even different perspectives, different values, different belief systems, different ideas of, different views of the world, build positive associations, bust stereotypes. I never like to go back to, COVID, but I do think that was a time where a lot of us experienced, maybe our closest group of friends and family. We realized maybe in certain situations how different we are, and maybe different ways of thinking, different ways of processing, and different belief systems, right? And actually, it became, as many of us know, it became very divisive, right? Even amongst family members, right? And within communities. And I think that's where, I always say within this presentation, I think it's really, really important, right? I think everybody has the right to, think what they want to think, believe what they want to believe, maybe not agree with something if they don't want to agree with it. Like, we have those freedoms that I think are very, very special and unique to us as Canadian citizens. And there's a very, very fine line where we start to almost like attack people for maybe thinking differently than we do, or trying to speak freely about a topic that they believe in. I think it's important that we do respect one another's differences and our values and our belief systems. But for me, again, I go back to that respect word. How can we do it respectfully? If I have a different opinion or thought or view on a topic than my partner, for example, we can disagree. I don't have to agree with the same, what he thinks or what he feels, but we can have a conversation respectfully about that. Right. So I think it's something to discuss throughout this presentation as well. And I would encourage everyone to slow down, with this work, breathe. Another hat that I wear is I teach personal safety for another company on the side. And I do a lot of work around, like boundaries, breathing, taking some time just to take a few breaths before we make a response or before we say something, right? And I think in this work, we have to stay mindful. We have to slow down our thinking, especially in stressful environments. And like I said, we have to breathe. Sometimes it's really easy to say something or to respond in a certain way, but I think we really need to start slowing down our thinking. Oh, I'm going to go back here. Okay. See, this is what happened now. Okay. See what it brought in my other PowerPoint, but that's okay. We're not going to waste a bunch of time on this. What I do want is I am going to ask for all of you to bring out a piece of paper. Okay, I want you to get a piece of paper, and as I'm fixing a few things on my end, if you could please take out a piece of paper and let me know when you're ready. Maybe give me a thumbs up when you're ready. Everyone have a thumbs up? Everyone have their piece of paper ready? Good. Katie, Lizdine, good. Okay. What I'd like for everyone to do is I want you to make a list from 1 to 10. And this is called the Trust It 10 exercise. And I want you to write down, before you start, I want you to write down the 10 most trusted people in your lives, okay? Now, before you do this, you can't use members of your family, all right? So take some time, and I want you to jot down the 10 most trusted people in your lives. Take some time. Oh, computers. 10. Okay, we'll give you a couple more minutes here. Okay. And now what I'd like you to do, you have your 10 most trusted people written down. Now I'd like you to mark. So write down the middle. I'd like you to jot down gender identity. So if you could write down their gender identity. So you can just, however their gender identity. Okay. I'll give you another minute from there. Okay, I'm watching everyone. Now I would like you to write down race. Okay, write down race. After race, I'd like you to write down cultural background, if you know their cultural background. If you know. Cultural background. So we should have gender, race, cultural background. Now the next one could be tricky. I want you to jot down age. Now you could even put, 30s, 40s, 20s. If you don't know the exact age, that's totally fine. Rewrite it. I had the greatest PowerPoint for all of you and it disappeared after you came on, but that's okay. We're going to make it work. Okay, so we have gender, race, cultural identity. Now we have age. And then what you could do is write down educational background. So what do you think their education level? Where do you see them? I want to rewrite something in here quick. Okay. So now we have gender, race, religion. Did you get religion? Okay, religion. If you know, some folks don't, they're not really sure of the religion. Okay. Okay. And then you had, I'm seeing Wesdean still writing. So now we have gender, race, culture, age, religion, okay, educational background, right? Does everyone have all those? Okay. So what I'd like to ask, and this is where I'd like for some of you to share, I'm going to jot down something here as well. Can some of you or whoever is open to sharing this, where did you see with your, first of all, I want to ask, how many of you, did any of you struggle getting 10 written down? Was it easy? Yeah, put your microphones on. Like there's only a few of us, so feel comfortable. How many of you struggled getting even 10?
Yeah. Once you said family was out, I was like, oh.
That's quite common. Okay. Can I ask one of you or whoever would like to go first, what did you notice with the 10 most trusted people in your life in terms of, similarities, differences, where you kind of noticed the highest level of diversity dimensions versus like the least amount? What did you see? I don't want to try. I'm just going to write a little thing up here. Who would like to speak? Who wants to share theirs?
I can go.
Sure, please.
So I noticed my close friend group that I went to school with are all white females who went to university aged 30 to 31.
Okay.
Some of us are Christian and Catholic. A lot of us have kind of distanced ourselves from the faith over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's kind of my more recent adult friends, and that's a bit more diverse. So
Yep.
My partner is half Jamaican, half Ukrainian. He has grade 12 education.
Okay.
He's Christian. And then I have a couple of friends who are Indigenous, and then a couple other friends who are who are white. I don't know their exact cultures, but
Okay.
so yeah, I guess I would say growing up, I had more friends who were similar to me, and then now since I've gotten a bit older, I've branched out a little bit.
Okay. Okay. So as you mentioned, your trust at 10, would you say that it changed over the years? Would you say, I guess like, I'm not sure what your age demographic is, but let's say like 10 years ago, if I were to ask you your trust at 10, do you see it being different now?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely people I lost touch with in high school. I played on the basketball team, and some of my close friends from there were a different race than I was and different culture. So I guess, looking back on it, I have definitely had some close friends who, aren't kind of exactly the same as me, but the ones that I really stuck with, my core group, were all pretty similar in that way. So yeah.
Okay. So you would say, so what I'm hearing from you is the similarities in your trust at 10 lied really into kind of like gender, mostly female,
Mm-hmm.
and then educational background, mostly university, like folks that you probably graduated with.
Mm-hmm.
And where do you see the least amount of diversity, do you think?
The least amount of diversity
Yeah.
would be in my core friend group for sure.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we're all different in other ways,
Oh,
but
for sure. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And
Okay.
then,
Well, yeah, go ahead, please. Keep going.
oh no, I was just gonna say some of the people I've met more recently, we are more like-minded, I would say, and we're similar in other ways. And so something I've realized is just looking for the similarities in people, regardless of, maybe what their race or gender identity might be.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Something hearing Katie speak, and I hope I didn't cut anybody off, but something that comes up even reflecting on my own list and hearing Katie speak, I think when I was younger, like a lot younger, I had a lot of friends who were very different than me, but then I came up to this, I don't know, kind of judgment from people in my own community being like, oh, like you have no connections to your community. Like you are very whatever, like you're not reflective of your culture. And so I think that's something that like even in high school and university, I went on to change. And most of my friends actually are of my same culture now, which is just kind of, I don't know, it's just an interesting kind of other side to it, I think. Because it was definitely like, it's definitely something that as I've kind of become more conscious of it, like I don't think it's a bad thing on one hand, because I get to connect with my culture and I get to have people who understand me on this completely different level, and understand like what it's like to have my mom call me and be like, hey, does this email sound all right? Or like, hey, this is an interaction. Like, is that normal? And like that's things that I just have every day. And so like having friends around me who go through similar things is kind of something that but I definitely see, looking at this list, I'm like, oh yes, I see the similarity bias. Definitely. And so, but I do think that as I kind of, I've been in university for what feels like forever. But I feel like as I kind of get into the workforce and things like that, it'll change. Definitely. But yeah, that was just kind of my thought process throughout.
Okay. I like it. I like it. And again, it's one of those things where, if we do find ourselves, in groups of people that, feel comfortable, they're like us, they're like-minded, it's not as if there's anything wrong with that. I think ultimately, we want to have things in common. We want to be able to share some of the similar interests. It's, I think it's a matter of more of, okay, are we excluding somebody, just because maybe they don't agree with one particular view that, that maybe some of us share. We'll talk later about that conformity bias, right? It's almost like that peer pressure piece, right? A lot of us are so comfortable conforming, right? Versus saying, okay, it's okay to have friends that maybe think differently than me, as long as it comes back to that respect. Like for me, it's a matter of, I can surround myself with people who have different political views, different views on all the other stuff that we went through, say during COVID. Me, I know where my bias, I think we all have to sit and really talk about some of this as this group when you look at where your bias lies. But as a mom, like there's certain lines in the sand I would have. Like, not everybody has to parent the same way I do, but there's certain things that I certainly wouldn't be able just to sit back and watch without maybe having a conversation, right? With my friend, if that was my friend. Like if, I was hanging out with, with somebody and, they were maybe teaching their children to not like a particular group because of their difference or the background. Well, that completely, that's against everything I believe in. Like when I say that I'm an ally and that I do this work because I truly love and I'm passionate about it, I mean that. I'm not just an ally and talk about bias and talk about hate, Monday to Friday, 8 to 5 kind of thing, right? Like I'm an ally 24/7, but I also, do it respectfully, right? I know that not everybody thinks the same way that I think, but I know that I necessarily wouldn't want to surround myself with people that are, raising their children, say, in a certain way that completely goes against all of my, a lot of my beliefs in terms of ethical beliefs and things like that. So I think there's certain ways we can look at this as we're moving forward throughout our own journey. But yeah, and we'll come back to some of that. What is it? Wesdean? It's Wesdean, right?
Yeah, it's Wesdean.
Wesdean.
I was really surprised because my doctor showed up on my list.
Oh, nice.
And I thought to myself, I think living with a disability, that whom our circle includes is quite different. And that we, as people with disabilities, maybe our circle includes some people that may not be like, no, I don't see non-disabled people saying, oh yeah, and I really trust my doctor. But that is, this is part of who is my team, who is Team Wesdean. Wow. And my doctor really is part of it. The other thing I noticed, because I do have the same age bias, oh gosh, yes, is that I didn't separate partners.
Oh, okay.
Because I am part of a partnership.
Yeah.
And a lot of my thinking, because I've been part of a partnership for so long, is that when I meet people, I meet both partners. And part of them remaining in my circle is that I need to find some sort of resonance with both partners on a different level, but that they somehow, I think of them as one unit.
Okay.
And so they may be a culturally diverse unit. They may both have different educational backgrounds, different heritage backgrounds, even different aging background, so they may be of different ages, but I see them as a unit.
I see.
Rather than as two individuals. And I think that has to do with the stage of life I'm in, because I wouldn't have done that 20 years ago before I became part of a partnership and before part of my identity was identifying as part of a partnership. And so that was one of those. So those were the little surprises to see. Oh yeah, I see people as units.
Interesting.
And that my doctor would even show up, which is kind of funny. Anyway, thank you.
And no, this is so good. So many things come out of that, Wesdean. It's funny that you would look at, say the partnership or that couple as one, but first thing that comes to my mind, I wonder what they would think if you asked them that. Like I think of, say, my mom and dad, they've been married for 53 years. but to look at them as one unit, it's like they're so different, right? Now they're a partnership. They're, they have a marriage that I'm sure has had its ups and downs, but they're so happily married, but I think like there's some partnerships that may say, oh, no, like they're my partner, but we are our own individuals, So that's interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. Did anyone else want to share anything that they saw with their trusted 10? And I really appreciate, Chelsea, your comment in the chat. Again, this is when we have such a short period of time to talk about issues like bias and assumptions. I try to do my best to kind of really stay on track and have this as more of a journey individually, because this is a topic I think it's important, not just to, that's why honestly, when my PowerPoint slide earlier just really isn't working, I don't really care, because this is a topic that I think really takes discussion, and it takes storytelling, and it takes sharing experiences. We can go through definitions, and we'll talk about some of those definitions for sure. But, Chelsea had mentioned, she made a comment about, when I had discussed boundaries and respecting different views. It is a slippery slope, and it's not just black and white. This is certainly an area that that I can be challenged in often. I think when people find out what you do for a living, right, there's automatically a bias associated to that, right? Like when I worked for the police, I wasn't even a police officer. I was a civilian employee. But when people asked what I did for a living, I would never say the police. I would always say I work for the city of Calgary. I'm in diversity and inclusion, et cetera, et cetera. But, even for my current job, my partner asked actually last night, he's like, so what do I tell people? Especially because, this in our current climate, right? The minute you say EDI or diversity and inclusion, people automatically think that you're a certain way, and they're not going to be able to talk a certain way around you, or they're going to have to stay quiet, and they're afraid to offend you. And it's like, whoa, I'm not that person. Like I'm okay. Like I can have conversations. I can laugh at certain things. There's just certain things I'm not going to laugh at based on my boundary, my line in the sand. Like, for example, racial slurs, when we get into the later this week, and I facilitate my Delete Hate presentation, a huge piece of that is really talking about language, the power of words, hate incidents. So there's certain words that just I am going to squash with my friend circle right away. And I'm going to have a conversation why. They can still be my friends. We're going to move forward. Now if they continue to disrespect me and my boundaries, and let's say they continue to use racial slurs around me, or homophobic slurs, or, even Westine, even the term retarded, I don't condone that. I don't like it. I think it's offensive. I think that there's plenty of other words in our vocabulary that we can use in the place of that. And I think what happens is we just don't know how to challenge folks. And, later, if we have time, I will be talking about this in Delete Hate, is how to respond to some of this stuff safely. Because number one is safety. I don't suggest you run in the middle of a grocery store and, put a superhero cape and, talk to everybody and try to respond to every single thing we're hearing out there, because safety could be an issue. But I certainly think when we talk about boundaries, we do have to have a conversation around that, right? So Chelsea, thank you for bringing that up. I think when we look at our trusted 10, the reason why I do this exercise, and this exercise, it can go into a lot more depth, but when we think about even leadership, and we think about organizations, and we think about who we are inviting into our circle of trust, right? And when I talk about that, there's different levels of trust, right? Like if you look at a sphere and you had different layers, like your outside layer is kind of the hi. I always look at it as the hi. Like how many people do you say hi and bye to? And I think Katie, you had said this, like that's my most diverse group. Like the people kind of that I say hi to every day, I'm kind of like chit chatty with, like that's kind of that. What we usually see is that's the most diverse. And then as we get closer, we think like the next level would be, okay, who are you going to invite over to your front yard? Like who are you going to welcome into your front yard, right? And then, okay, that group might be getting what we see a little less diverse. Like we start seeing maybe more of those folks are a lot like us. Maybe similar views, similar values. Maybe we've known them a lot longer. And then we have like that core, that middle, you know, who are you going to have into your home, right? Like who are going to welcome into your home, and, you know, and that's that trust at 10. And when we look at that, if you look at that at the workplace, for example, organizationally, you know, if we are building teams and organizations based on the people who are like us, like when we talk about like me bias, like if we're only say hiring people or giving people that are like us the, you know, the fancy positions or the, you know, the opportunities to do things, or if we're only listening to certain voices, what's that going to do to our organization? Right? Like, what is that truly going to do to an organization if we're only promoting and giving people that are like us the opportunity to speak, to make decisions? And I think reality is we see this happening quite often in organizations, right? We see, you know, the change makers, the influence, the people with the highest level of power and authority. You know, you look at some of those groups, and a lot of times it consists of people that are very similar, when all research will show, you know, a good team, good decision making takes different people to make that decision, right? Like groups of different people, you know, not just like-minded people. Like if we only surround ourselves with people that think like us, look like us, eat like us, everything. I mean, not only, again, my personal opinion, like I always joke, if you saw me, you know, Jessica saw me last night without my shirt on, like maybe without my glasses. If you saw me out on the street, I have covered in tattoos. I've been judged. I've been put into that box, you know, by certain people just based on how I look on the outside, right? But I don't just surround myself with people that look like me. You know, I have some of my best friends are in their late 60s. I have some friends that are in their early 20s. I have, you know, some friends that are, you know, identify, you know, from different, you know, different identities, you know, and I have a daughter that has a learning disability. You know, my own cultural background is different. And for me, that's how I learn. You know, if I only surrounded myself with people that just thought like me, no one ever challenged some of my views and opinions, well, I'm only going to see the world in one way. Right? Because, you know, we want to have people that are able to challenge some of our views and opinions in a respectful way. Because you're like, oh, okay, I never really thought about it like that. I never even, you know, and then you get into the whole growth versus fixed mindset. You know, if we have a growth mindset, we're able to hear some of that, right? We're able to take some of that information and say, okay, you know what? Maybe I should look into that a little bit more. Maybe I should do some research. Maybe I should, you know, watch a different news channel, or I should maybe explore a different topic, right? And you talked, Katie, about faith, you know, background, religious groups, right? Oh, Edward, I came to Canada when I was 7 years old. Yeah, schooling in Canada. And honestly, my Delete Hate program, I'm making the decision to resign from a very cush position, guaranteed paycheck, pension, you name it. Like it was it still is a very scary decision, I think, that I've made. But you know what, Edward, the reality is our school system needs a lot of work. You know, I just presented to 85 teachers at Forest Lawn High School on bias and assumptions. And we had, you know, 3 hours or so, and that was scraping the surface, because some of the things that they experience and some of the names that they're even being called by students, right? Like it goes both sides of things that they're experiencing, right? Not being excluded. Who gets, okay, Dean, who gets invited to the table? Yeah. Well, and you know, you talk too when you get into the area of microaggressions, and sometimes, you know, the one with the loudest voice, you know, they're the ones that are often heard. I recall years of my career, I would try to say something, bring up an issue, or maybe, you know, would have an idea, and it was almost as if it wasn't even heard. You know, it's like you have well, hello, test, do you hear me? You know, and sometimes our voice is very, very small. All right. So, Edward, my friend groups and networks, yeah, were like me in terms of ethnicity and worldview. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's an excellent point. It's safer, right? And I think that goes to safety and security, right? When we have people that have the same worldview. But I think it's a really interesting opportunity to listen to people that have other worldviews and maybe other opinions, as long as they're doing that respectfully. They're not, it's not as if they're trying to change our opinion or influence our thoughts. They're just saying, this is kind of what I thought. This is the research that I did. One thing I will say, and we'll get into some of this quickly because I know our time is ticking, but just to kind of go back to this trust to 10 exercise, I guess all I would say to folks after this exercise, and Katie, you brought it up earlier, if there's a particular group that you see that you're not maybe educated, maybe you don't have a lot of education around, you haven't maybe met a lot of people from this particular group, you're not informed, or you haven't been exposed to, a particular way of life, I always say walk towards it, right? Like learn about it. No one says that we have to, like everyone, get along with everyone, take people into our friend circle just because they're different. Like no one, I don't think that's what we need to do. What I always encourage people to do is walk past, I call it the 10%. Okay. And when I say the 10%, it's our visible layer. Have conversations with people, get to know a little bit about their values, where they came from, why they think the way they do, what influences some of their perceptions of the world. And you know what? And if we choose after a while getting to know someone or learning a little bit, if we say, you know what, that's just someone that I really don't have a lot in common with, and I probably wouldn't want to hang out with that person, but it has nothing to do with bias. We've gotten to know a little bit about them, right? We've learned a little bit about them. I think what happens is we stop at that 10%, right? When you talk about the visible layer, a lot of times we'll look at somebody or we'll look at a particular group and not even engage in any type of conversation. We'll say, oh no, they don't think like me. They don't look like me. They don't, talk like me. We're not going to have anything in common. And we make that assumption without even having a conversation with people, And I think that as a society, I think it's shitty, like it's straight up, it's shitty, because it's like, there's so much more to us. Thanks, Jessica. There's so much more to us than what people see. Right. And I could share stories, so many stories of things, not only in my career as policing, some of the comments I've heard, some of the things I experienced. I think some of the other, women in this group, sometimes how we're judged just based on being a woman or our age, right? If we're older, if we're younger, people may not take us seriously. They go, oh, well, she's just, as Dean, I know you talk about generational differences, right? And the bias amongst some of the groups and some of your friend circles, right? I mean, there's generational differences there when it comes to bias, and where does the bias come from, Katie? Exactly what we talked about in the beginning. It's not like it comes from the air. It comes from somewhere. It's a matter of identifying it and acknowledging it, because even in my safety workshops, I talk a lot about how our bias can actually impact our safety. Like I do a lot of stuff around, like self-defense and personal safety and things like that. But I think if we're only paying attention to a particular group that we deem to be dangerous, and I mean, that's a whole other exercise we could do down, or we could explore down the road. What's a dangerous person? And when you think about that, what comes to mind? And we don't have to open that up here today. But when you think of, what does a dangerous person look like? What comes to mind? And those images are coming to your mind based on your lived experiences. Things that maybe something you watched on TV last night, like we talked about, experiences positive and negative. Sometimes just what we've heard. Like, I think about all of the little ones growing up in households that aren't educating and exposing them to this. Then what else do they know? They only know what they're learning from home and then what they're seeing on YouTube. And how dangerous is that? Right? So things we have to think about, right?
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to, like you were saying, the media and the types of news channels we watch, things like that. Mm-hmm. But that's a really insightful sort of question to pose about, what is danger and who is dangerous. And, a lot of times in the past, I've thought that, the other is dangerous. So whoever isn't like you, that's dangerous. So just stick to, people like you and stick to your own bubble. But the more I think about it, the more I'm kind of like, okay, no, not everyone who's different is dangerous. And some people who are, maybe visibly more similar can actually be dangerous. And some of those people might even be family members.
Amen. Yep.
So,
So true.
yeah.
That is so true. And you'll see this changing, as you get older. That's one thing sometimes I forget that I'm getting older, but then in the morning it reminds me. But it's one of those things where it's like, it blows my mind how much I change and how I see the world. And, little things I pay attention to, very, very aware of my surroundings, but I'm also paying attention to so many things that are not just, my biases and assumptions. I'm taking a lot of things into consideration, right? Yeah, I can be, yeah. Well, and I think, Westine, I think it goes back to not personalizing it. We talked about this earlier. It's not about, that someone could look at you and say that you're dangerous. Okay, sorry. I thought you meant that you're thinking, oh my God, I'm dangerous because I think a certain way. I thought you were going to pop on to say something.
We forget that just because we look like, I always call them the typical politicians, that also that itself can be perceived as being dangerous, as coming in paternalistically or as potentially causing somebody else harm. Yeah. And, I remember working in various positions and saying, remember, you're always the guest here. You're in their space. And your job is to be the best guest you can. But also realizing very, very early on that because I walk in and because of the color of my skin, that it comes with assumptions of power. And to be very, very conscious that I know I'm not being perceived maybe as I see myself in the same way that somebody else is not being perceived as they see themselves. And so that's part of that dignity, just giving back somebody the dignity to be who they are, and also to realize their perceptions of myself and who I am do not match in the same way that their perceptions of who they are and maybe those biases I carry, just because I am a human, that they also exist. So the bias runs both ways. And to, just understand that and maybe just hold that with you as you enter into these relationships. Quite often when I talk about changing my perception, somebody will say, oh, well, why would you have thought that? And I said, because I'm racist, okay? That's why. I was taught how to be a good racist. This was what I was taught in my school system.
Wow.
And just really bloody naming it. Because if we name it, then it's not scary. Then everybody can use it. And by saying, okay, this is a negative piece about me, and this is what I'm working on. Yeah. That does help. It for me, that's part of the safety building.
Yes. I love that, Westy. I'm really glad that you said that. Like I said, there's so many different pieces of this workshop, that I would love to discuss. And I think one thing, and Ivana, thank you so much for sharing that. And that is what a lot of research, and I know in a lot of psychology classes, I also took psychology, and that people are more likely to remember negative interactions with minorities than with people that look like the majority, right? There's so many different books you can read when you think about like decision making. Everything goes into, when you talk about interactions, like when you talk about bias and assumptions and stereotyping, everything from hiring to retention to, you look at your resume writing, your job, your oh my gosh, the list goes on and on. We talk about like rapid decision making and quick judgments, where a lot of times someone's quicker to feel threatened, right? Or in danger if they're encountered by a particular individual of a particular group that they're biased towards, right? Or that they've maybe had a negative experience with, right? So yeah, Ivana, I think that's absolutely right. One thing I want all of you to think about too, as you move forward in this work, and this is what I always use this, and you can even use it in your own like personal relationships, intimate, whatever, work relationships, separating the intent and the impact. So, it's one example, and I know we don't have a lot of time. We'll go over just a couple of minutes if you're okay with this. I just have like a quick little thing to show you, maybe a video. I'll show you my contact information. But separating the intent versus the impact. And I really, really focus a lot on this is when we talk about responding to bias or responding to forms of microaggressions or just, forms of racism, discrimination. A lot of times people are really, really quick to make it about themselves. Well, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to do that. I'm a good person. I'm not a racist. I can't be this person. Look at me. And it becomes me versus whoa. Let's focus on the impact. What was the impact? Never mind trying to explain yourself and who you are. The impact is the impact. You use an example of, someone runs over your foot. Oh my God, you ran over my foot, right? What do you mean I ran over your foot? I'm a good driver. I never ran over anyone's foot in my life. I'm the best driver. And all of a sudden you're like, I don't care what kind of driver you are. I have a broken foot. Like my foot is still broken. Like, let's focus on my foot here, And a lot of times in this line of work, when, maybe we make a comment and maybe says that was racism or that was bias or that was discrimination. It's like, okay, I'm sorry you feel that way. Tell me how I can fix this. Because I apologize. My comment was not to offend. What can I do to fix this? Versus like coming up with excuses and trying to like make it about us, right? Versus really when it's about the impact. I use it in my own personal relationships where someone says, well, I said sorry. It's like, okay, you said sorry, but let's still talk about the impact, right? Like, let's talk about why this had an impact on us, whether it be the words someone used, someone's behavior, so I think that's a big piece that we don't have a lot of time, but you can do a lot of research in this. When you look at microaggressions, intent versus impact, there's a ton of stuff on YouTube you can look into, but I'd highly recommend that. So I want to read to you. I want all of you to read this and you tell me. Oh, and we'll go into it. And I want you to read this really quick. I don't know if you can see this. I'm going to read it and you tell me what we can do here. A man and his son were in an accident. The man died on the way to the hospital, but the boy was rushed into surgery. The emergency room surgeon said, I can't operate. That's my son. How is this possible? Anyone have any ideas? You can put it in the chat. Mom is a doctor.
His mother.
Oh, hi, Elisa. Oh, hi.
Hi.
What do you think? How is this
His
possible?
mother.
His mother?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Or his father who's in the LGBTQ.
That was my guess. I was with you on that. Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, after listening to some of the sessions yesterday, I was thinking about how a lot of Indigenous people were taken from their families. And so I was thinking that it could have been like a biological parent.
Oh. Yeah. Or blended family. Yeah. When I first heard this, Elisa, just like you, I thought, oh, okay, biological or foster parent. I thought just like you, oh, well, this is the man's partner. They were in a same-sex relationship, and that's their son, right? Anyway, the surgeon was his mom, right? But often, yeah, you got it. You were so much better than me. I was like, what? They're really good in this room today, because it was like, boosh. I thought, oh my gosh. And there's a few of these that, you know, you can go through, and it really shows your bias. I mean, I thought I was like, oh, no problem. I got this, hands down. They were in a same-sex relationship, that he has two dads. And I was like, no problem. And I didn't even like see it at first that mom was the surgeon, because I think when it comes to certain professions, right, there's still so much bias associated with different jobs and different careers and professions. So, Elisa, if I had a prize, buddy, I'd give it to you. But you got it. And I think, Jessica, you got it right off the bat as well. So good job, right? But there's a lot of these little riddles that we can look at, and you know, it's one of these things where we forget, right? We just forget. Yeah. Katie, honestly, I didn't even, until the instructor had showed me, I didn't guess it. Another one I want to read to you is just like a couple of examples, and I know we'll shut it down. I'll answer some questions. Like I said, please feel free to come check my workshop out in the next few days with Delete Hate. But explicit and implicit, you know, unconscious bias. For example, you see someone outside wearing a t-shirt, you know, of your favorite sports team. You make a split-second decision that you like this person, you know? And for those of you that are sports fans, I can really relate to this. I'm a huge sports nut. You know, I'll see someone, I'm a huge Raptors fan, although they're not doing too well this year. And I'll see someone, I'll be, oh, Raptors, oh, we must have so much in common. And it's like a split-second decision. I don't know this person. This was based on, you know, this was obviously, it was a conscious decision on my part. It was deliberate thinking, you know, and the awareness of the process, right? So when you think of that, right, that explicit versus implicit. So that was kind of an example of it, that explicit, right? You're like, you know, you really don't know anything about this person, but you think, oh, I must have something in common. Look, she's wearing the same, you know, sporting, you know, Calgary Flames. I like the Flames, or they went to the same university as me, right? We must have something in common. We must like each other. The next one, in a restaurant, someone at the table beside you just does not seem right. Your friend asks you what's the matter, but you cannot express it. You know, just something doesn't seem right about that person, right? So again, we talk about our experiences, right? A lot of this is like that implicit piece, right? Where, you know, it's a result of past experiences and we're unaware of the thought and it's involuntary, right? So there's that difference there, right? And I think a lot of us can relate to times that we felt that maybe we have felt that way, right? Are any of you familiar with the term conformity bias and confirmity bias, those two? So conformity versus confirmity. Anyone want to take a shot at that?
Never heard of it, but I'm definitely going to use it in my next paper if I may.
You were going to use it in your, what was it?
Well, once I know about this, if I may use this in my next paper, it sounds like what I work with. So.
Yeah, and honestly, after this, if you ever have any questions, you can give me a call, email me, and I can give you any information you need.
Great.
Yeah. So I know we're really going past time. Conformity bias, and I really had to wrap my head around this one too, because I really struggled with, like I was talking last night to my partner, cognitive dissonance versus confirmation bias. Then you have conformation bias. So conformity bias is a tendency to conform with the opinion of others as a consequence of peer pressure, right? And this is something that, you know, I think we may have seen, experienced, taken part in, right? So it's that we're conforming to, you know, a bunch of others' thoughts and beliefs. The confirmation is when you're seeking information out. So it's that tendency to look for evidence that confirms our already existing opinions. So that's the difference, between conformity versus confirmity. So conformity, you're seeking out information. And I think we see that with a lot of folks quite often, right? Where, people are only seeking and looking into information that's just going to prove what they already believe, and I have lots of fun conversations about this with a lot of my friends because I see it on Instagram, it's constant. They're just like putting out things and putting out things and putting out things. It's like, who are you trying to convince? I think that's the trouble. And again, we don't have time to talk about the impact of social media, but that's the trouble with social media. I think what we need to do, like people can throw something on social media, you might get some chats or direct messages or whatever, but like we're missing this conversation and the dialogue, right? Like I think it's important that rather than just throw things out of, randomly on social media, like, and I know there's room for that, there's a place for that, but I think what we're lacking is dialogue, right? Because I think like we need to talk about some of this stuff, right? Yeah, and I think it's important to look at different resources and different places for information. Like I always say to people, I'm so immersed in the work that I do, I don't have the time to sit home for hours and delve into some of these stories and read other articles. Like I'm immersed in the work that I do. So sometimes it's nice for me to hear from somebody else of another way of thinking. Doesn't necessarily mean I agree with it, but it's just not something I have time to delve into. Okay. So yeah, the difference there between explicit and implicit, we talked about what is bias. And I think a lot of us know that, I think a nice way to look at this is, we will shine a light under the surface to raise awareness of our unconscious bias, right? Once we see them, then we can work with that knowledge and ultimately change our behavior, right? So we know we have them, but it's like, okay, like, what are we doing? Are we not going to certain places or avoiding certain groups because of it? Is it really starting to impact our lives in a certain way? Are we not, there's some parents who aren't letting their children, go certain places or hang out with certain friends from particular backgrounds. Like where does that fit into our day-to-day lives and how is it impacting ourselves? And how can we look at ultimately changing our behavior, right? This is a couple other ones I put in. I use this a lot in classrooms with teachers, and I talk a lot about, the halo effect versus the horn effect. And I don't know if you're familiar with these, but a common halo effect is like people that are attractive, right? People that are attractive, people assign positive qualities to them. I was doing a safety class the other day and there was a fella, he was from Colombia. He was so funny. I guess he was on holidays with a bunch of his buddies. And they were traveling abroad and they were at this nightclub. And he said there was a group of people and what they were doing is they were trying to rob tourists, right? But these group of people, they were gorgeous. Like these women were like supermodels, I guess. And he was like, I knew something was fishy because she wanted to talk to me. I was laughing so hard at him because I'm like, but you're nice looking, but he was so funny about it. He goes, I knew something wasn't right because she wanted to talk to me. But I guess what they were doing is they would go out and people would make the assumption that, oh, they're nice, they're attractive, they're good people. And sometimes people will associate positive qualities, right? And, we see this, the classroom, it can impact students' learning. And then the opposite is the horn effect, right? And, I've experienced this with my choice to have tattoos. It happened with my employer. It's, I was even nervous to go meet my partner's family, because they don't have tattoos. And I'm like, what are they going to think of me? And it's unfortunate, but it's the reality, right? Again, going back to that 10%. And it can cause a lot of anxiety for people. And, so for me, I have like a full body of tattoos. I think of people from a different, cultural background, racial background. If someone is choosing to dress in a particular, religious attire, how they feel when they walk into, a particular environment, right? It's unfortunate when you get the looks, when really a lot of it comes from, curiosity. And I always say, like, ask me a question. I'll be the first person. Yeah, Elisa.
Sorry.
No, I like it.
It's just, I hope I'm not having any bias right now, but I often say that people, when they get upset that their kid is scaring. I'm like, no, let them ask questions. Like, because if they ask questions now, they won't be nervous about it later, kind of deal.
Yeah.
Because I'm a quadriplegic. So.
Oh, Elisa, I hear a lot of, I've done a lot of work with folks from, the community that are quadriplegic, varying abilities. And that's exactly what they'll say, like ask questions. I have parents that I know that they have twin babies. And when the babies were just under one of the little girls ended up catching meningitis. Was it meningitis? I think it was. Anyway, she ended up catching it twice. Long story short, this one of the twins is left nonverbal, can't walk, in a wheelchair. And the mom will say, when I'm out in public with my daughter, I just wish people would ask questions instead of just staring and pulling their kids away, and I think it's like, and like yourself, Elisa, like you want people to learn and ask questions as long as it's coming from a respectful place. Hey, yes. Can you tell me a little bit about what happened or what your experience is like, or just to get to know you for being you versus what people see, which is 10% of who you are.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we were talking about biases, and I find there's a huge bias from the disabled community. Sorry for anybody else, but there's a huge bias from the disabled community towards able-bodied people. And yeah. I have a big issue with that. I'm like, we need these people. We can't fight them. We have to work with them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, my son is in public school, and his school makes it a point, to include, children, with varying abilities. And I'll tell you what great exposure it is for kids to see that as a daily, daily occurrence, right? And to see like, hey, this is so-and-so, they go to my class and it's no big deal. They ask questions, right? I think it's awesome. Katie, your cat's hilarious. Okay. So again, I know we're just going to get to some questions, but going back to the self-awareness piece, all of you, like I cannot say enough, please continue your journey, continue to learn, reach out to people like myself. I'll show you my website here in a moment. My contact number's on there. Read books. I wouldn't just say read one book, read different books from different authors, talk to people, like switch up some of the things that you're doing and just really, there's that implicit association test we talked about earlier. Okay. I like this one. This is important. Hey, Lisa, we can relate to this one, right? Don't believe everything your mind thinks, right? Because often our mind does some funny things.
Yep.
I do like to kind of bring this up, and this is something that I discuss in a lot of my presentations in more depth, but I think it was you, Katie. I also was raised in a Catholic household, and my partner in a Christian household. And, growing up, it was treat others the way you would like to be treated. We would hear that. And I'm like, wait now, I know a lot of people that don't want to be treated like Liz. Like I am different than a lot of people, and that's okay. I have a different rule. I like to treat others as they want to be treated. Right? Like I'm not going to make the assumption that everybody wants to be treated like me, because they don't. Right? So for me, it's about respecting people's feelings. It's getting to know how they want to be treated. Right? And again, we're not going to know that without talking about boundaries, talking about, values, their belief system, how they want to be treated and why, so we're lacking that, that connection, right? So I think we really need to start connecting. Okay. I know we don't have time for all of this, my lovely friends, but I would say that please reach out to me. Come pop in and see my presentation. I want to say, I don't know my book in front of me. I think it's on Tuesday or Wednesday, the Delete Hate presentation. Pop in, come see me again. If any of you, I think it's on Tuesday. So I'll be at 2:00 on Tuesday. But if any of you want any information, workshops in your communities, with your organizations, or just want to chit chat, call me. My website is there, as you can see, www.pohconsulting.com. But I'll show you other stuff here. And that's me. That is my phone number. I had some cute little YouTube videos that I was going to watch. We could watch one if you want it, but you probably all have better things to do. There's so many beautiful videos. So with that, I know you all have such a busy day. My apologies for technology. To be honest with you, I don't like it anyway. So I just love to speak from the heart and speak through storytelling and experiences and learn from all of you. I hope you felt that this was valuable. I hope you learned a few other, words, definitions, terminology. And I hope that moving forward that a few things, you give yourself the gift of taking some of those IAT tests. And just because you took them once, continue to take them. I take a few times a year. They don't take long. They're free. And talk. If you're struggling in a certain area, if you're struggling with a certain group and, you need someone to talk to, find someone you trust. And that person absolutely could be me. You're welcome to call me anytime and have a conversation about it and just really try to work through it. Negative experiences, things like that can really have a negative impact on our lives. So I just want to say thank you. It was so great. Edward, I appreciate all your help with the technology. I have some more time to practice until Tuesday. So amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. For those of you that were watching online, reach out. There's my info. So yeah. Thanks again. And I'll stick around for questions. I'm in no rush. So I'll stick around and have the best rest of the evening.